Welcome to the Jeremy and Andy Talk Movies podcast.
Yeah.
I'm Jeremy,
I'm Andy.
and this week we are returning to our ongoing thing we're doing throughout the year. We're revisiting the year 1999.
What a year.
What a year indeed.
Good grief.
And I actually, just this week, on the Big Picture podcast, the podcast we both listen to, they did a 1999 movies draft, and I sat down and watched all 2 hours of this draft just to hear them talk about 1999 movies and talk about a couple of the movies that we've already talked about some movies we're going to talk about some today. So I think everybody who's into movies is kind of celebrating that this is a big year.
Oh, yeah.
Big anniversary for a big year in movies.
I feel like maybe you started it. This was your idea. I think you kind of got that ball rolling. I know you don't want to brag on yourself, so I'll brag on you.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate that. So today we decided that we had gone a little dark with our first movie selections. I mean, the first week was Blair Witch. Our first time we did this was Blair Witch and Fight Club.
Yeah.
So, classic horror movie and then a very dirty, gritty, dark comedy movie. And then the next month we did Magnolia, which is a really melodramatic,
super duper melodramatic movie.
And then Bringing Out the Dead, which is
something. We don't even know what that movie is. It's a wild.
Scorsese doing dark, dirty New York at night.
It's rainy, dark, gross New York.
And then, so this month, I think you made a great call to say, let's go a little lighter.
And did we ever?
Brighter. Yeah, we swung the pendulum.
We're not. We're not. We didn't go for the big brainy movies this week.
No, we did not.
No, or this week.
But what I want to do is, actually, I want to start out with the more family friendly option.
Okay.
So my pick for this month was 1999's The Mummy.
Yeah.
Which, to me, I think the craziest thing about this to me is still that I can't believe it's a 1999 movie. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it is. It just feels older than that. I think because it feels like such a a throwback movie. Yeah.
Little Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah. But even just comparing it to the other movies that came out that year, I don't know why. I just feel like I was a little kid when I saw this movie.
Yeah.
But then I look back and timeline wise, I was the same age when I saw other night when I saw Fight Club, The Matrix. I don't feel like I was the same age watching The Mummy as I was.
Because The Mummy makes you feel like a kid again.
It does.
Because I don't want to give it away right off the bat, but it's just such a blast.
Yeah. 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 And, talking about not wanting to give things away right away, but I'm going to jump to my conclusion right now, which is they don't make movies like this anymore, which what I mean is big budget, self-serious movies for 10-year-olds.
Yeah.
Which is essentially what this is. The target demographic of this is probably 10 to 13-year-olds. Mm-hmm. All the family can enjoy. It's not that adults can't enjoy this, but they just don't make big blockbuster movies that are, again, kind of self-serious for 10-year-olds this anymore.
Yep. Yeah, they literally do not make them like this anymore.
Yeah. So, I'm going to run through some of the just basic stats as I like to do to set the stage for these movies. One is that Rotten Tomatoes scores, this was a 61% from the critics, 75% from the audience. I'm actually a little surprised the audience was a little higher because when this came out, I feel like this is sort of one of those universally liked movies.
Yeah, I just can't imagine leaving this and being like, you know what, that just did not give me what I wanted out of a movie called The Mummy.
Right, exactly. Now, financially, big success, about an $80 million budget. And worldwide, it grossed $416 million.
Oh, yeah.
Which is incredible. It's awesome. I'm glad it did that, but it's also why we got multiple sequels that probably didn't even happen.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
The movie was directed by Stephen Sommers.
Yeah.
Stephen Sommers has had what I would call a really interesting career.
Yeah.
The Mummy is definitely the high point of his career.
Yeah.
But I just want to run through these movies because I can almost just go ahead and list all of the movies he's done, even though he's been working across decades. Mm-hmm. So the first one that I wrote down was 1994's The Jungle Book, the live action Jungle Book that they made, which actually is
kind of
it's like a
fun,
maybe even a guilty pleasure of mine, how much I like it.
Yeah.
But I was probably the perfect age to see that and really enjoy it. And it actually shares some commonality with The Mummy as far as that a serious movie or self-serious movie made for 10-year-olds. Yeah. Deep Rising in 1998, which is kind of like a cult classic.
It's really kind of a fun movie.
Yeah. Scary movie. The Mummy in 99, and then it was The Mummy Returns in 01. Van Helsing in 04, which was a dud.
Should have been fun.
It should have been.
It wasn't.
G.I. Joe Rise of the Cobra in 09. Odd Thomas in 13, and that's the last thing that he's directed.
It's kind of a bummer.
So you're like, it looked like,
it looked like
the first ones I named were kind of like he's on the rise,
and like Hollywood definitely needs guys that are just, they're not ashamed to be like, you know what, I'm just trying to direct fun movie, exactly like you're saying. Like I'm not going for an Oscar. I want to entertain an audience, and it seemed like he was doing that, and then it just nosedived fast.
Yeah, it makes you, it just makes you wonder. Like, there's a lot of people who have directed a lot of bad movies, but they keep working. I wonder why he just hasn't worked very much. And I don't
know. I didn't research that like I probably should have.
Yeah, I mean, same. I didn't look into if he was. I kind of, my thought was like, I wonder what else he was doing, and then I didn't look into it at all.
Yeah.
So that's just a rhetorical question. So I was surprised to see this is one of those movies that had multiple writers, and I guess I'm not too surprised. It's not like it's such a well-crafted story that I'm like, man, it had to be one person's vision. But it's also one of those movies where I think it was based on previous IP, previous movies. Sure. So there was several writing credits for the original thing.
Yeah, you gotta.
Then there's several, Stephen Sommers is one of the credited writers. Then there's another guy who I looked through and
I know
much. And then one of the writers was Kevin Jarre, who I just wrote down notably, wrote the movie Tombstone, which is one of my all-time favorites. So, hey, there's something there.
Something there, for sure.
It's again, we talked about it all the time. When there's a team of writers, you go ooh, that's usually not a good sign.
Yeah, but this movie doesn't feel like a jumbled mess like it often does.
Yeah.
It's got it's pretty straight narrative and everything.
Yeah, I think for a movie with 3 credited writers, it's about as tight of a story as you could hope for. So, the movie stars Brandon Fraser, and Brandon Fraser, the note that I made for him is he fits the tone perfectly. Like, Brandon Fraser as an actor is exactly what The Mummy is as a movie.
Yeah.
Like, he's a little cheesy, he's a little goofy, but kind of fun, but and likable, and he just perfect marriage of actors' abilities and the movie that he's in.
It's great.
In this one.
Yeah, I watched this again, having seen him a million times, and I was like, you know what? Brendan Fraser's really good in this movie.
He is.
For what it requires him to do.
Yeah, and he's a guy that I don't, definitely not disparaging Brendan Fraser at all and saying he's not really that much of a good actor.
Right.
And I think he's, he won an Oscar for The Whale.
Yeah.
And I thought that was well deserved. He was great in that movie.
He was great.
But, early on, he's playing very goofy, silly movies.
Is it like Encino Man or something?
Encino Man was the first one I think he popped up in. He's in this. He was in just silly movies like Blast from the Past.
Wasn't he in George of the Jungle?
Yeah. So he's not making prestige stuff. He kind of knew his lane.
But you know what? I always thought of him as one of those guys that's like, you know what? I just kind of like seeing this guy in the movie I'm watching.
Yeah.
I really thought of him that way. I never was like, boy, move over De Niro. But it was just like, you know what? I like this guy. He's kind of charming and he's funny. And he always kind of seemed to me like he was always kind of in on the joke.
Mm-hmm.
Even in something like Encino Man or something that's stupid, it was almost like you felt like he was kind of like, yeah, I know. I don't know. He just always kind of had that charm, and I always liked him.
Yeah, for sure. I think, and I may be just misreading this, I think kind of the thing that I remember even seeing a little bit of him saying in interviews and stuff is he's a good-looking guy, but he's not quite classically easily handsome, and he felt a lot of pressure to stay good-looking, and I think, the Mummy movie was probably the peak of oh, look at this handsome guy.
Uh-huh.
And he's probably a guy that naturally would be a little bigger if he wasn't working out all the time and stuff. And he was feeling the pressure to I've got to be.
It's kind of sad if you read some of those interviews.
Brendan Fraser, and I think he just got tired of feeling that pressure of I've got to look like a leading man.
Yeah. And he legitimately comes across as a nice human being.
Yeah.
So part of me just wonders if maybe he never felt like he just fit in Hollywood. I don't know. This is all speculation. Then he popped back up again in Killers of the Flower Moon, and I remember there was a little bit of people were like, "Geez, he's doing he's yelling and stuff." I thought he was good in Killers of the Flower Moon, and he was famously in the Batgirl movie that got filmed and we'll never see it. So who knows if he would have been good in that?
Yeah, I'm definitely curious to see if you were going to have a whole renaissance of Brendan Fraser, and
I'm here for
okay
it. Yeah, I'm here for it.
Happy for it. Rachel Weisz, who it was kind of her big breakout role, I believe, and I would have never guessed that, like, not to say she's bad in this movie. This is just not the movie that you would watch and go, Rachel Weisz, I bet she's going to be a prestige actress for the rest of her career,
right?
And yet, like, that's really what's
all she did, really. Yeah.
And then there's really, like, outside of that, it's
there's big
some
stars,
that guys,
a few that guys, and then just some people that fill the role nicely. I thought,
yeah, for sure. I mean, the guy who plays Rachel Weisz's brother in the movie, his name's John Hannah. There's something about him that I feel like I watch him like, I feel like this guy's been in 100 movies that I've seen. And I look at his IMDb and it's like, no, mostly like just the Mummy movies. Yeah. But he's so good in it.
He's so good.
And he feels, like you're saying, he feels so right for the part.
Yes.
And that's another thing that I want to say is a little different about movies like The Mummy and any movies they make today. It's almost like movies in those days knew how to stereotype in a good way, if that makes sense.
It does make sense.
Like, you see that guy in the movie and you go, of course he's that guy. Like, that's the guy. Like, that's exactly what I would expect this character to be, just based on, like, what we already kind of know pop culturally, assuming about characters. And, like, you can't do that anymore, I don't think.
Yeah.
You can't have characters, like, every character in this movie feels like almost a cartoon character in that they're fitting this really cookie cutter type.
Right.
And sometimes that's nice in a movie.
It is.
I mean, it's a little lower level of, like, the Jurassic Park thing. That's one thing I love about the movie Jurassic Park is all the characters are very, like, stereotypes of each thing that they are.
The sleazeball lawyer.
Yes.
And everyone knows. It's like everyone has a role, and so you just cast, and they fit that role perfectly. And there's no overthinking it. It's just here you go. And sometimes that's very necessary for a movie.
Yeah. You don't have to make it complicated. It doesn't have to be like, well, what's,
what are the social implications of the? Who cares?
Like we're just gonna. Nowadays, actors have to be so complex. They've got to be like, well, what's the background of my character, and what's he thinking, and, like, why is he a complex character? And back in the day, it's like, you don't have to be complex. Like, you're just this guy.
It's like the brother character. It's like he's kind of the comic relief in a way. He's a little bit of a buffoon. He's kind of clumsy and stuff, but he's not. I don't know. Yeah, you're exactly right. It's like, and it seemed like back then they were just happy. Like, okay, I'll gladly fill that role, and I'm gonna give it my all. And he's great in the movie. Is he gonna win an Oscar? No, it doesn't matter though. And that's something I know I wanted to talk about that with both these movies. Like, it just didn't matter back then. And now you're definitely right. It definitely feels like there's been a shift.
Yeah. So I kind of broke this up and just for both these movies into just two categories. What were these movies' strengths? What made these, what was good in these movies, and what were the weaknesses?
Sure.
So I want to go through some of what I put as the strengths of these movies. I wrote good acting.
There is good acting.
And, it kind of goes back to, like, just exactly what we're saying. Actors just going, I get this is my part, and I'm going to play it, and I don't have to do anything special or overdo it. I've just got to hit the notes that they asked me to hit.
And I always think to myself, like, as an actor, who wouldn't want a job like that? Like, really, you hear stuff now, the equivalent, I guess, maybe would be like a Marvel role or something. And you hear these actors, I understand it a little bit more now, but when Marvel was like sky high and like you'd hear different actors like kind of turn their nose up at Marvel and you're thinking, come on, like this is a great role. Just sink your teeth into it and own it. And that feels like what everyone does in this movie, from the guy that plays the mummy included. Like, everybody's great.
Yeah.
I love the human bad guy, just like Benny.
Yeah.
He's great. Where it's like, hey, I just need you to be just the sleaziest, like most unlikable little dirtball. And it's like, will do. Gotcha. And he's so entertaining.
But also, like, what I really noticed watching it this time was he's also funny and in a way, like, endearing. Like, I wouldn't expect, like, when I was younger, I was like, yeah, he's just a worse. And then watching this, I'm like, he's the worst, but, like,
kind of like this guy.
He has a couple of the funniest parts in the movie.
He does. Yeah. It's a well-acted movie.
Yeah. The next thing I wrote was a great score. Like, it's one of those scores that it's, again, maybe even stereotypes a little bit, like the Middle Eastern, but like, it's perfect.
It works.
Yeah.
And you have to understand, too, when you're watching this movie in 1999, we weren't preconditioned to be offended by stuff.
Yes.
So you're like, yeah, that's what the music should be.
Yeah.
And it holds up well, I think.
Yeah. I mean, there's just something to when you hear a score and you go, like, you're like, yes, of course this is the score to this movie. It's exactly what it was supposed to be. It sounds exactly like
it does. And they come up with like that nice menacing music for when the mummy is on screen.
Yes.
It all works.
Yeah, which goes right perfectly into my next point, which is it's just a good villain.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this, like, I remember when it came out. Okay, so I'm going to back up a second here.
Sure.
Mummies are one of those things, really any monster like that, where I'm like, I don't know how every kid knows about their existence. You just do. I guess it's maybe Saturday morning cartoons or something. You just all know what a mummy is.
When I was little, I had a like toy Frankenstein, Dracula, Mummy, and Wolfman.
Yeah.
And I just played with them. And it was like it's like we talked about with Batman.
Yeah.
You were just born knowing who these characters were.
Yeah. But to me, it was like mummies were always kind of the lamest because there's nothing scary about a toilet paper scarecrow.
And the old cliche was like they used to hold their arms out and just literally like barely move.
Exactly. So it's like when a movie's coming out, you're like the mummy, you're like, how's that gonna be scary? And then you watch this and go, oh, the mummy is this like super powered Egyptian god.
Like, well, this is cool.
Plagues and it can turn into sand and like there's just it was a great villain. It
was a great villain. And it was the perfect time to reintroduce the mummy. Because I think over the years, there had been a lot of Dracula movies. There had been a couple different Frankenstein movies, even like Young Frankenstein, which is, Mel Brooks's riff on Frankenstein.
Right.
I don't know that I'm 100% right, but I think there had not been any mummy material out in the world.
For decades.
Decades. Since like the black and white, I think. I could be wrong, but I'm just saying, point being, like, it was the right time.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, cool, the mummy. Like, enough, like you said, enough people knew who it was, but they didn't have a sour taste in their mouth from previous bad movies or anything like that. So I just remember it was like, oh, cool, the mummy. Like, I want to go see that for sure. It was great timing.
It was. And then the last good thing I wrote is just what, like I said, I jumped the gun. What we already talked about is that it does what movies don't do anymore is it takes itself seriously while allowing itself to be cheesy.
Yeah.
And I think movies nowadays have to be so self-aware and are so like allergic to being cheesy.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if we make sure they all know we're in on the joke, then we can't be laughed at. Is kind of how movies take it now. And I miss movies being willing to be like, yeah, we're just going to be cheesy.
Yeah.
We're
just going
to. There were so many of them in the 90s. I was thinking the Mummy, like Independence Day is like this. Like it's not afraid
Twister,
to be a big.
I think, even falls into that category.
It was just like, it's almost like that's what big summer blockbusters were. I mean, people used to say, like they're popcorn movies. Like you turn your brain off.
Look at something like Con Air, which is just ridiculous, but you have a blast watching it. And they don't do that anymore.
Yeah. But then I wrote down this scary thought. Do they make these? And this is actually what Godzilla times Kong is. And I'm like, I hope not.
That's a scary thought.
Like, my fear is like, yeah, they do make these, and like, I'm just not recognizing it anymore. And
I don't know.
I don't think so. Because I think Godzilla and Kong movies are so dumb, and they're just. We always talk about it. It's visual noise.
It's visual noise. They're lifeless.
And watching this, the pacing is like good movie pacing. It's not just like I don't think it's the same, but
like something like The Mummy, even though it is like a special effects fest, but it builds a little bit. It's not just boom, here it is everywhere, all over the place. It builds, and there's likable characters, which is something you don't get a lot anymore in these big budget action movies. It's just the characters are so disposable, and everyone in this movie is entertaining and likable.
Yeah. Do a great job. That concludes my list of like strengths. Did you have any like you would want to touch on before
I'll point out a couple? I think the CGI is really endearing.
Yeah.
It's obviously you watch it now in 2024 when we can do anything, and obviously you see I don't know how to write. I don't want to say like it looks like a video game because that sounds like I'm insulting it. Like you can see it's CGI.
Right.
But there's just something so endearing about it. And I think they did a great job with like the way the mummy, when he comes back, he's just this rotted corpse. And as he kills people and like he takes the one dude
he regenerates in stages.
And that's done well. Like maybe it doesn't hold up, but it doesn't need to. It was like, that's what they had at the time. It was really good at the time. And I don't know if you want to call it nostalgia or what, but I loved it. I thought it looked great. And I've talked about it on here before. I always long for the days when movies couldn't do everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was a cap on how, there was a ceiling on how far you could go with CGI.
Mm-hmm.
So when something like this happened, it was really cool because it felt like it was really pushing right up against that ceiling. So I thought the CGI held up great.
Yeah.
And then, I don't want to be repetitive, but just like you said, man, this movie is so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's not trying to send a message. It doesn't have an agenda other than just to entertain you.
Yeah.
And then we've touched on it already. Like you said, the acting, more or less anything, but just the characters. Like, that's the secret. And maybe that's what's missing. Like, by the time the mummy comes back in this movie, I'm invested. I like Brendan Fraser's character. I like the sister, or the brother and the sister. You've got the dynamic between Brendan Fraser and the bad guy. Like, you care a little bit about these people. You're not getting some kind of, you're not getting like ordinary people level of character growth and development, right. But you spend enough time with these people and you're like, you know what? I like these people. I'm interested. And so then when the mummy shows up, you care.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's something that movies, I think, fail at a lot. They don't get you to care about the mission or the purpose or the reason for the characters even being where they are. And then you just get the bad guy or the aliens or whatever, but you don't care. Like, this movie just takes that. I'm not talking about a lot of time. It just takes the little necessary time to make you care. And obviously, immediately, like, Brendan Fraser and the girl like each other. So you're like, okay, that's something to latch on to. It just takes a little bit of time in the midst of this ridiculous movie called The Mummy to make me care about these people. So then when the mummy shows up, I'm invested.
Yeah. How much do you think this movie is indebted to the Indiana Jones franchise?
Yeah. So I didn't know how to bring that up, but it takes kind of, very Raiders of the Lost Ark, but you're not sitting here going, well, this is stupid. It's just a Raiders of the Lost Ark ripoff. It kind of takes the tone of that movie, which was so fun, and applies it to its movie. And I have no problem with that. Did you, don't you think? Like, did you sit there and go, oh, rip off?
No, for sure. Like, and I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying, like, almost like the stereotype of characters. Like when I remember being a kid and seeing Brendan Fraser in this role, and just his wardrobe and everything. I was like, yep, that's what an adventurer looks like. And I don't think I would have known in my mind, like, that was probably informed by seeing Indiana Jones when I was younger and being like, yes, that's what an adventurer, like action hero and this sort of time period looks like. And because we have archetypes of those characters and they're like, he's just going to fit in with those archetypes.
Yeah. Like Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones, it lays the groundwork. And then if it's done well, other things can just follow what it's laid down. And it doesn't have to be just a ripoff. I mean, obviously, there's no mummy stalking and killing people in Raiders of the Lost Ark, but it just takes the ideas, the themes, and the tone of that movie and runs with it. And kudos to them. Like, if you're gonna borrow from something awesome like Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah, for sure. It's almost sad that, like, the 3 Indiana Jones movies come out, The Mummy comes out between when they actually start trying sequels, and none of the sequels past The Mummy have been able to do what even as well as The Mummy did in catching that tone again.
Yep. So that's really all I wanted to point out that you didn't point out.
All right. For weaknesses, I wrote this down, but like as I wrote it down, I was like, this actually goes in both categories. It's an effects-driven movie. And I wrote, some holds up impressively, which is what you're talking about. Like, there was actually a lot of the special effects that hold up impressively. There's just sometimes when you look and go, like, it's a 25-year-old movie that was highly special effects driven. Like, it's going to be little. It's going to didn't affect my enjoyment of the movie at all. It's just like when you watch it, you can tell. Like, when it first came out, it's one of those, blew my mind.
How they do this?
Oh my gosh! And you watch it now, and you're like, it doesn't look quite as clean and like
it doesn't.
It's just how it always progresses. When it happens, you're like, I don't know how they can do it ever any better. And then once you've seen better, you go, oh, I guess I know now how it could be better.
Absolutely.
Rachel Weisz's character, boy, is she obnoxious. I'm not saying not like I dislike her in this movie or anything, but like, boy, they really play up the first scene, the introduction, where she knocks over the bookshelves. And you're like, first off, why are all the bookshelves arranged in a way where they can all be knocked down?
I know.
But it's just kind of like, I don't know. I just didn't remember it like testing my
your patience almost
with her
much.
as much.
I get it.
But,
That's fair.
But yeah, and again, it probably works as well as it does because Rachel Weisz is a really great actress. She's also incredibly lovely. I'm just going to throw that out there.
And it's so charming when she's like, "And what are you?" She's like, "I am a librarian." Yes. And like that, you're like, "All right, that's great."
In the hands of a lesser actress, maybe it would just be an obnoxious part, and but she makes it very charming.
She does,
despite all her just quirkiness,
her buffoonery at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah. We said the acting is really good. The acting weakness in the movie, I think, is the trio of guys that play the Americans. Everybody else in the movie
that really falls into like we talk about, like the mustache twirling villain.
Just a couple of those guys have line deliveries. I'm like, ooh, that can't have been the best take that you got of that
fair.
one.
That's a fair point.
But there's small parts in the movie, and nothing that takes away from it. I just thought all the more main characters all hit home runs with their acting, but
sure,
the American guys playing the American guys. So, and then the last thing is just that I wrote down was the plot. And this is what I mean. I love quoting a line from the movie Everybody Wants Some from our guy Glenn Powell. They get kicked out of a bar because one guy caused a commotion, and when they get outside, he just goes, just from an outsider's perspective, totally avoidable. And like that's what I was thinking watching this movie. I was like, okay, let's just run through the plan here by Pharaoh's guards. Once they catch Imhotep, like back in the day, they're going to punish him with a curse that potentially makes him a superpowered monster that they have to fear for 3,000 years. Seems avoidable. So for generations, they oversee the burial site while never once thinking, hey, let's go ahead and just destroy what's on the surface here so nobody comes looking for it.
Right.
Let's just flatten it. Rather than leaving this city of gold like that everybody's looking for standing. And then they never once come up with a contingency plan because once they wake the beast, they're like, well, now we got to figure something out.
Yeah.
Maybe just in your 3,000 years of waiting and watching,
come up with an idea
on the side at a time. Yeah. Coming up with that idea. So again, I know this is one of those movies, don't spend too much time thinking about the plot, but I was like, I'm just like, couldn't you have made it that Imhotep, who is this like sorcerer dude, sets himself up so that they kill him? He can come back. Like, don't make it so the same people who are trying to get rid of him also empower him.
There you go. That's totally fair.
Yeah.
I always think like when movies like this, I think there's a certain rewatchables episode. It may be like Die Hard 2, I think is what it is. And they go through the whole thing and they all love it. And then like when they get to the picky nits, Bill Simmons like, so here's my picky nit. What is this movie about? And they're like, what? He's like, yeah, like they're doing all this stuff, but if you stop and actually think like, what is everyone's agenda in this movie? And The Mummy kind of falls in that category where you're like, wait, what is this movie about? Like, what is Brendan Fraser trying to accomplish in this movie? I really don't like even watching it, like whatever dialogue they used to establish it. I think she's like, I'll pay you such and such to take me to this. But like 10 minutes later, you're like, wait, why are they? Because it doesn't, and I'm kidding, but it's like, it doesn't matter.
Right.
But if you did want to nitpick, you're like, wait, what? Or like, hey guys, I have an idea. Like, just don't do the thing. Like, don't go where the dangerous mummy might come back. You can always pick these movies apart.
Right.
But that, I will say real quick, that's how you know this is a good movie. Because in a bad movie, you're not entertained and you get bored. And that's when, like for me personally, that's when I sit there and I just start picking at everything. It's like we did Madam Web. We just nitpicked it for an hour and a half because it's such a bad movie. I don't care if there's dumb plot holes in The Mummy because I'm entertained the whole time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the lack of entertainment, that's when those big plot holes really jump out to me. But if I'm entertained, I really don't think about it that much.
Yeah. And they do a great job of being propulsive. And when they have to do that whole backstory, it's being narrated over, but it just moves quick.
It moves.
And
they tell you exactly what you need to know and nothing more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it moves fast enough for you to not have to dwell on it.
You don't.
And it's just because I was watching this for the 100th time.
Oh, definitely.
And for a podcast making notes that I was like.
Or it's like, it's like you're sitting there, wait a second, but then like something cool pops up on the screen. You're like, oh, never mind. I'm just going to go watch this cool thing that happens.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, there's all sorts of little nitpicks you could do. Like, hey, when they discovered that he needs to find the 3 Americans and drain them of life to fully regenerate, but also he's terrified of cats. I was like, hey, guess what? 3 Americans, you're cat people now.
Yeah.
Carry a cat around
just
everywhere.
Have a cat with you literally all the time.
And, but little things like, but the movie has to happen. So, of course.
Exactly.
And the other thing that I will say, though, is I don't know why. It always surprises me rewatching movies like this from my childhood. When I rewatch and go like, oh, I think this whole story takes place over the course of like 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot faster than like, I don't know why. Because it seems like such a big movie. I just imagine it taking place over like more time.
Yeah.
And then because like even a nitpick like that, like why do you not just have a cat with you all the time? Maybe cats weren't that available in Egypt and this happened really fast.
Happened really fast.
You know, like so like, oh, I guess that actually kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
So
I'll tell you my number one nitpick, and I'm not even really being serious. I love in movies like this how when she sees Brendan Fraser the first time and he's getting ready, like they're going to hang him, and he's got like the long straggly hair, and then like one scene later, he's got this. It looks like he went to like the nicest barber in the world, and it's like, isn't this like, this is taking place forever ago? It's like, luckily some guy knows how to give Brendan Fraser a perfect haircut.
Yes.
In the 20 minutes between when she saw him last.
Yes, and like perfectly white shirt.
Yeah.
You're like, I can't keep a shirt perfectly white in modern conveniences, and I don't walk around in the desert.
Yeah, he's in the desert, but he comes out and she, of course, gawks at him. I mean, he just looks like he's on the cover of GQ. And it's like, they had really nice facilities at this place where he was getting ready to get hung 10 minutes ago.
They do a very similar thing with her when they are off the boat and like she was in her nightgown, so they have to go like get new clothes.
Hey, we found this dress.
It's like Egyptian, and all of a sudden it's like she's all that moment,
and it's like
her.
It just so happens to fit you perfectly. Yeah, I mean stuff like that just makes me laugh.
Yeah, but it's again, it's a movie just having fun.
It's having fun. Who cares? Yep.
Man, I don't know. I don't want to go through and like say a bunch of more things that like are real specific about the movie. I think most people that are going to listen to this have seen this movie and
I hope
are
so.
on board. I did. I went on social media yesterday and just posted. Anybody want to share some thoughts, and so I did want to just share a couple of responses I got from that. I think my friend Joya said, honestly, she said of The Mummy, honestly, one of her favorites. Brendan Fraser was one of her first Hollywood crushes. So there you go. Like,
I bet a lot of people of a certain age range would echo that.
Yeah, for sure. Another friend of mine, Jessica, said it's one of her favorites, even though it's historically incorrect. She likes the adventure. Again,
that's a great way to summarize. Yeah, if you're looking for historical accuracies, maybe don't hit your wagon to The Mummy, but yeah, great adventure.
Yeah. So
I would just say too, like you're going through your negatives list, other than like the nitpicky things that you and I are talking about as movie nerds, my negatives about this movie, nothing. For what the movie is, I can't think of any major fault in it. Or, it's not like, man, why did they make this decision? Or why didn't they do this? Nothing. It's such a fun movie.
And just showing like how movies have changed. You look at the Tom Cruise Mummy from however many years back.
What is that, 2017, I think?
They tried to have more of a like modern movie sensibility about it.
It's a bad movie.
It's a joyless movie.
It is. It's stupid.
Took away
I love Tom Cruise.
Took away all the cheesiness. It was like when you took away the fun and cheesiness from a Mummy movie, you're left with what? Blandness?
And that's a movie that nobody talks about. That was supposed to launch like this. What was that? Like the Dark Universe?
Yeah.
And that movie came out and then they were all like, no. Like people just rejected that movie.
Yeah, it was so bad that even after like The Invisible Man came out and was a success, they were still like, yeah, but no.
Yeah, like the bad taste of that Tom Cruise Mummy movie is a real thing.
Yeah.
I want to ask you real quick, what did you think about the Mummy in the Mummy movie? Did you like the guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought he was. It's like, hey, ham it up. He's certainly not like a good actor in the movie, but he doesn't have to be.
Right.
And of course, a lot of times it's not even him. It's like the CGI of him. But like the dude did a good job for what he needed to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, another guy that I thought was really good was the guy that plays the head, like not modern, but in the movies, modern Pharaoh's Guard guy.
Yeah. He did a good
played
job.
by Oded Fair.
Yeah.
And who... The only other movies I'd ever seen him in, or I ever saw him in was Deuce Bigelow, Mel Gigolo, and Resident Evil movies. But
what a resume!
When I was a kid and I thought he was actually the coolest looking guy in the movie.
He's
The, like,
super
long
cool.
hair,
long hair, like the handsome dude, and
great voice,
good look on screen. Yeah,
he was really again. Probably a stereotype, but perfect. Like if you fit that, like
I said before, in 1999, not once were any of us sitting there going, "Well, this is a little bit of a stereo." Like, no, I was going, "Give me some more popcorn," because I'm so into this movie.
Because nowadays this movie comes out and everyone's checking like the actual ethnicity of every actor in the movie and stuff, and I'm like, I don't know, but like,
that drives me crazy. I heard someone say once, they were talking about movies today, like you were talking about, or in these movies. They weren't worried about this and this and this. And it's like so many movies come out now, and it feels like the director or the producers and the actors are so afraid that they're going to get made fun of on Twitter. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, that's a great way to put it. And of course, back then there wasn't any of that stuff. But there's just a fearlessness of like, yeah, this is ridiculous. This is cheesy. I'm really going for it here. Like there's that scene where the mummy yells at Brendan or like growls. And so Brendan Fraser kind of yells back at him. Mm-hmm. And Brendan Fraser is really going for it in that scene.
Yeah.
Who cares? It's like, I guarantee you show that in any theater, it's going to get a chuckle from people.
Yeah.
Brendan Fraser is not sitting there going, well, they might turn this into a meme of me doing the yell and stuff. And that, it's like there was just such an innocence almost to movies back then because they just weren't afraid of any kind of repercussions.
Yeah. You're absolutely right.
Just a great time. I had such a fun time revisiting this. I've probably seen this movie 40 times. I wasn't bored for 1 second watching it this week.
I wasn't either. I will say I would love to know what like current 10 to 13-year-olds think about it if they're shown it. I would imagine it holds up. I would imagine still 10 to 13-year-olds, like I said, I think would like this movie.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I would imagine, again, 25-year anniversary means it's about the age where like adults have who saw this as 10-year-olds now have 10-year-olds that they would go, I want to show you this movie from my childhood. So I imagine it's getting recycled like that.
I hope so. I mean, I saw it when I was 19 and I have a almost 19-year-old now. Yeah. And my older kids have seen it and they're like, oh man, that was a really fun movie.
Yeah.
And I guess this would probably be a discussion for another day, but like one of the all-time, like, I'm not going to say they shouldn't have made sequels, but you're like, man, how did like The Mummy is like so fun and everything. And then you watch The Mummy Returns and you're like, nope, the magic's gone. And I remember watching The Mummy Returns in the moment when it came out. And like 20 minutes into the movie, just having that sinking feeling of like, they didn't do it again. And then at the end, The Rock shows up as the Scorpion King and it's laughably bad CGI. And I guess on my point in all this is just saying like, it is kind of too bad this didn't spawn like 2 or 3 more really, really fun movies. And it just didn't.
Yeah. I never saw beyond the second one, which I know.
Yeah,
there's 3 or 4.
There's 3
for sure.
But by the time the third one rolled around, Rachel Weisz was out.
Right.
They recast her. That's almost always a bad sign. And what is the third one called? Like the
Tomb of the Dragon Emperor or something like that.
And I don't even know that I've ever seen it all the way through.
Yeah.
Like it's just really unfortunate when like the wind goes out of the sails really quick sometimes. Yeah. And
the second one, I always remember for 2 reasons. One is there's one moment that always did really crack me up, and that's
when they outrun the sun.
Well, I meant that it cracked me up intentionally. That one's
unintentionally.
The intentional moment is there's like the little pygmy characters, and there's a scene where they run across like a tree, that's fallen like as a bridge, and he throws a stick of dynamite back, and a couple of them catch it and they fight over it, and the one wins it and runs with it like, it blows up.
Yeah.
I don't know why. That always that genuinely made me laugh, and I remember that one. But the other thing I always think of with that movie is that I saw it on Friday and Saturday night of its opening weekend. And the reason why is because a girl.
Yeah.
And, so Friday night I went and saw it with friends. Then here's the thing. We talk about this all the time. We're very honest about who we were as high schoolers. I had 0 game in high school. I have no idea. Like, my memory is being on the phone with this girl, and we were talking about going to see a movie, and I was like, what do you want to see? And she's like, oh, that Mummy movie came out. And I was like, I just saw that. But I was like, I will go see it again.
A girl wants to be with me.
And all I can think is, how did I even end up on the phone with this girl? Because I know I didn't have any game. I was terrified of girls and phones. So, like, I have no idea.
It's your worst nightmare.
Like, how in the world did I pull this off?
The Mummy was Misty and I's first movie we ever saw together, and that was when we were like we liked each other and all that stuff, which did make me wonder, what are date movies now? I know I'm getting off topic, but it's like that's another thing the Mummy had going for it. I would almost consider like a positive, like such an obvious, because like you said, we're playing it safe. Like it's violent, but it's really not. They always cut away.
Yeah.
Like it's gross. Like, the guy gets his eyes or his tongue, isn't it? That he takes the one guy's tongue. You don't see anything gross.
No.
So it's like, that was the perfect date movie, because you're like, look, I can take a girl. She's not going to be grossed out. Like she's going to like seeing Brendan Fraser up on the screen. Like, and it just made me wonder, like, what are date movies now?
You know what? I just don't think they make good. And what I would call that is a great first date movie.
There you go.
The wide appeal where you're going like, I'm not worried that I'm
I'm not. Yeah.
Because nowadays there's probably good date movies for like when you know each
other really well, and
movies,
their taste.
Let's go. You can be scared, and like that can be a good date movie thing, but you can't first date. That.
No. The Mummy is such a good example of that, and that's what we did. It worked great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and you think about that, like, what I know we talk about like movies being afraid of like being cheesy and all that stuff, but like, there's clearly a void here.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you'd think somebody would step in and capitalize on this void. So. And again, please just nobody come back and tell me that's what Godzilla and Kong is.
I hope not.
Which apparently a lot of people are going to. And
it's still making money.
So, gosh.
Yeah, I know. We just had a lot of different thoughts and conversations, but I hope most people have seen The Mummy. And if you haven't, by all means, go check it out, because it's a blast.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll finish off The Mummy there. We'll leave it behind because we talked about it a lot, and we said before this started, like, we could talk so much longer than we do. For anybody who's like, man, your podcasts are long, we try to keep it.
This
brief
is
for
like,
you guys.
I am making a very concerted effort to talk, as least as I can. This could be a 6-hour podcast.
That's right.
Week.
But now we're going to transition into, so we had the family friendly, we're going to transition into the very mature,
the highbrow Varsity Blues.
Varsity Blues. I'm going to give the basic stats, but then I'm going to let you just maybe tell me why you chose this and like what your thoughts go.
You're going to do the stats first?
Yeah, I'll do. So 45% by critics, 76% by audience. That does not surprise me at all.
There's nothing surprising about what you just said.
It was a $16 million budget. It grossed $54 million, worldwide, which is almost exclusively.
I bet another $100 million from DVDs and VHS.
Probably.
I bet you anything.
Yeah, certainly. All right, so Andy.
Yeah, okay, so it's kind of funny. Like, I didn't pick this movie because I have like some, it's not like, oh, this is one of my top 10 all-time favorite movies. I picked this movie for a few reasons. Like, number one, we wanted to do the 99 gimmick. Is there a more 1999 movie than Varsity Blues?
That was one of my first notes, was this might be the most.
And what I mean by that is just like the people that are in it. There was this huge run where they were trying to grab all these people from like semi-successful like WB or CW shows. Like, exactly what I'm talking about. They were just grabbing them. A lot of times they'd throw them in horror movies. Mm-hmm. That's how you got like Neve Campbell in Scream.
Yeah.
They grabbed her from Party of Five. I know there Jennifer Love Hewitt, and I know what you did last summer. Yeah. I know there's more examples. So I wanted to pick, like, I remember the trailer. It had like a certain like a Foo Fighters song in it.
Yeah, My Hero. That was another thing, an MTV production.
Yes, I was going to say that.
And you could always tell the MTV movies because they had the most like pop culture needle drops of any other movie.
So I wanted to pick it because, like, number one, it's just such a 1999 movie. I wanted to pick it because, and we talked about this when we did sports movies, they just don't make sports movies anymore. Mm-hmm. I think you nailed it. I think you talked about this. The sports documentary overtook the sports movie, and it's really unfortunate. But it's such a... It's such a easy way to win in a movie. Like, just give me a sports movie.
Yeah.
More or less know what you're getting. There's going to be, here's this ragtag bunch of people, and boy, things just aren't going their way, but we're going to band together and our positive attitudes are going to, we're going to go on this high. There's almost always some kind of tragedy. And there's, of course, evil, either, like in this case, their coach, but, there's just all these formulas, but it almost always worked. And then I think it's just interesting to revisit a movie, and we've talked about this already, so I don't want to dwell on it. But like, and this is such an example of like, they didn't give a crap. This movie is not worried about who's going to be offended. It's not playing it safe. It's not politically correct. It's stereotyping to a major degree. Women play a very specific role in this movie. And I'm not saying any of that's right or wrong. I'm not here to get into the moral implications of any of this, but I just thought it'd be fun to go back and look at a time where movies could come out and it was like, this is offensive to you, then don't go watch it. And that's what this movie is.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, like I said, my first note was, is this the most like 99 movie possible?
Yeah.
And what I wrote was exactly a couple of things you said. The lack of political correctness, for sure. Yeah. Like in every like late 90s into the early 2000s teen movie had to have a character like Tweeter in this one, played by Scott Conn. They always had to have the one character who was like really over the top,
just like so over the top.
You know, in American Pie it was Stifler. And, you know, they all had to have that.
It was character. Just the way it had to be back then.
Yeah, that nowadays like you cannot have that character.
The funniest thing is nobody questioned it.
No,
it was just like, yeah, like fact, of course.
Everyone would be like, "Oh yeah, you know, every friend group's got that guy," is what they would all say.
That's why I wanted to talk about this movie. Like, it was so funny back in that day how you just, like you said, you just accepted, like, yeah, that's just what friend groups are like. There's the smart dude, there's the this and this, and so, there's the crazy guy. And so, like, by the time you get to Scott Conn driving around naked in a cop car, you're just like, yeah, seems about right. Yeah, and it's just something amazing about it.
The next note of what makes it maybe the most 99s movies is the clothes, specifically James Van Der Beek's pants.
Yes,
James Van Der Beek's pants are so baggy.
They're
and
incredible.
Wide. It is like
they're just incredible.
I just had to laugh and be like, yeah, guilty. I wore pants that big and baggy, and it just looks so funny.
It's incredible.
Yeah. If you if nothing else, just Google image search a picture of James Van Der Beek in this and those pants, and it's hilarious.
It's amazing.
We already mentioned this. The MTV movie and the needle drops. Like, the songs are big at that time.
Yeah,
they do "My Hero" by the Foo Fighters several times.
It was all over the trailer.
It was all over the trailers. And then again, this movie has almost nothing in common with The Mummy, other than self-serious ridiculousness.
Yes,
like. They know it's silly and cheesy, but they're taking that silliness and cheesiness seriously, and I love it.
I gotta say, in a weird way, watching this movie this week, I don't want to regret my words, but it was almost better than I remembered.
I'm with you.
There was parts where I was like, oh, like, this movie is not just Scott Conn driving around naked in a cop car. This movie is not just the famous whipped cream bikini scene. Like,
right.
I'm not saying it all lands, but you're like, oh, okay. Like, this movie is maybe it's just a little bit better than I thought it was.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
And right along with that, James Van Der Beek is a little better than I thought he was.
That's what I was going to say. I don't remember if I made this joke on air last week or just privately. You was like, any excuse to talk about Van Der Beek. And I thought we'd be able to come in here today and have all this material to make fun of him with. He's not bad in this movie.
No.
I'm not 100% sure that he should have tried to master an accent.
Yeah.
You know, maybe just leave the accent behind. No one's going to care. But I'll tell you what, he is not bad in this movie at all.
No. That was one of my notes under weaknesses for this movie is it's always a challenge when they set a movie like in Texas.
Because then everyone feels like
none of the actors are ever from Texas. And like, you know, we talked about stereotypes, and every actor in this sounds like someone who's only ever seen portrayals of Texas.
Yes.
And
it's like,
and honestly, like, none of them do it so much. It's like it just pops in like certain lines they deliver, and like it's almost like they remembered, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be from Texas. I better lay it on thick in this line.
Oh, it's like anytime Van Der Beek's, what is it? The famous line when he's like, I don't want your life.
It's the opportunity of a lifetime for you, but I don't want your life.
Yeah. And that's what I thought we'd be able to do is come in here and be like, oh my gosh, let's just take 10 minutes and rip Van Der Beek to shreds. No, he's not that bad in this movie. He's really not.
Yeah, he's solid.
He is.
It kind of made me wonder, like, you know, what happened? You know, like, we talked about he was on a popular show. He did this movie, and before I rewatched it this week, I guess would have been like, well, what happened was he just wasn't actually that good, and so but he was good enough that I'm like, okay,
he pulls this off.
Yeah. So one of my notes, I actually separated this one into 2 sections because it was like mainly thoughts about the movie, and then I had to have some notes about the football because it really is 2 things. Like, this is not a movie that's just a football movie. This is a high school, like, just teenager drama.
It is.
And a football movie melded into one. Mm-hmm. So you could almost separate the 2. But the football, one of the things I wrote was, do I believe in James Van Der Beek as a quarterback? Like, and that's always almost one of the first things you watch in a movie like this is, do they pull it off? And I wrote in parentheses, yes, because of Manning Mellon. He's got a head like the Mannings.
Right.
Like, he almost doesn't look like an athlete, but I think because I know Peyton and Eli Manning have heads shaped very much like James Van Der Beek's, and I go, yeah, he kind of strikes me as a Manning type quarterback. And he's playing almost like a smart guy who's, just a little different, like quirky, like, but, and when he throws a football, like, I actually bought it. I was like, I believe he'd be a good high school quarterback.
By no means am I a sports expert, but there wasn't like, oh my gosh, none of that. I was like, you know what? Okay, I'm along for this.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and get some of this other football stuff out of the way.
Go for it. This is more your area than mine.
First off, it always cracks me up. Like, one of the things I'm glad we've actually moved on from in sports movies, the part that the cheesiness that always gets me too much is the opposing team that has ridiculously over the top celebrations. Yeah. So like the score and like break dancing, the whole sideline.
Oh yeah.
And it was so over the top. I was like, this had to be part of the joke, was how over the top it is. Mm-hmm. But it always kills me as someone who's like, no high schooler has ever scored a touchdown and done a break dance while all his teammates are over also doing dances. And
maybe they should start doing it. Kids of America today, make these games more entertaining. Start breakdancing. No, you're right. It's ridiculous.
The couple of things that also like that you could never actually get away with, like when he intentionally downs the ball by throwing it off mascots' faces. It's like, that's hilarious. But you're watching, they go like, yeah, that's a penalty. You know,
can't do that, dude.
It is a great moment though. The first time he does it, everyone's laughing, and then the dad who he hit directly in the face kind of has a realization, touches his nose, like, wait a minute. My son threw that ball at my face on purpose, didn't he?
Yeah.
That's a good moment.
It is.
So here's my thing I was thinking about while I was watching. I was like, okay, a couple things. One, this movie is actually weirdly like ahead of its time, because Mox's whole thing is he comes in and he starts trying to implement like spread offense stuff that becomes really popular in a couple of years in college football. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like rewatching this.
Varsity Blues was trying to tell us.
Varsity Blues was onto something. But also I was like, but Mox, from a guy who is a coach's perspective, he is a pain in the butt that you would bench because he does not listen to the coach. Like,
so like, some realism.
Is the coach like a villain? Of course, because he gets like physically abusive. Yes. Like he does not care about the kids and all. Blah, blah, blah. He does all that. When it comes to them and him being like, run the ball. You've got a great runner. Yep, let's do that. Let's be conservative. Right. He's actually making some good coaching decisions, and Mox is just messing up his game plan. And as a teenager, watching being like, this is the thing. Every teenager thinks like, yeah, like I actually know how we should do it. Like, they like to imagine they're like Mox, even if they're not the starter, they're like, if, I went in, I'd be smart. I'd have my own way of doing things, and we'd be successful if we did it my way. No, you wouldn't. Like, the coach actually knows better. Like, so that just, again, something that takes away the enjoyment of the movie from me? No, not at all.
It's just stuff like, you notice.
You just watch and you're like, yeah. And then, of course, the ending, like the most ridiculous thing, which you're fully into it at this point, into the cheesiness, but a high school team that comes out of its locker room at halftime without the head coach, somehow there's not even assistant coaches around.
Right.
The injured quarterback is calling the plays and calling timeouts. No ref is questioning this.
I know.
The people in the broadcast booth, they're like, still no sign of that head coach. It's like, okay, but like he was on campus packing up his office. Literally no administrator at the game was like, I should go try to locate this guy.
Right.
I could find him in his office. Like everything about that is so like.
Of course, it's ridiculous.
It is so ridiculous. I'm like, you could have helped yourself out a little bit. Like have an administrator go down and like find him in the office and he's just like, tell the administrator I'm done, or something, like just anything rather than like, we have no idea where this guy is.
Well, but the game must go on. But therein kind of lies the charm of the high school sports movie.
Yeah.
Where you you just populate it with these quirky high school characters, and by that point, you're just kind of willing to accept anything. You really are. That's why I'm so surprised the sports movie has disappeared. I want to talk some more about that at some point.
I would also have to say there's a line, and it's not even like one of the key lines of the movie or like one of the taglines of the movie, because it's the actual coach Kilmer who says it, played by the great John Voight, who was like, that was another thing that would happen is like these MTV movies, you'd get like the young people, but you'd always have to get that one actor who's like established to be like, give it credibility. And in this one, it's John Voight.
It's John Voight. And it works. That's a formula that works.
What I love about John Voight is he's one of those actors that no matter what he's in, he's treating it like he's in The Godfather.
Dude, go watch the movie Anaconda.
That's exactly what I was about to say. Like that dude... you
feel like he was convinced he was going to win an Oscar for Anaconda.
Yeah.
And one of the most ridiculous movies of all time.
Yeah. But, he delivers the line before the championship game, 48 minutes for the next 48 years of your life or something like that. And I don't know, maybe it wasn't even original for him, but like I felt like that was something that still kind of saturated into the culture. And like 10 years after this movie's out, I'm coaching a sixth grade basketball team, and I remember us going out before one of our big rivalry games, and one of my little sixth graders who's wearing way too many like headbands and shooting sleeves, being all hyped, and we're in a line to run out, and he's hitting his teammate in the back shoulders. But then he's like, "You play 24-minute games." Sixth grade, he's like 24 minutes for the rest of our lives, and I'm like, no, this is a sixth grade basketball game, and like, darn you, Varsity Blues,
curse you, Varsity Blues. What have you done? That's great, though.
Yeah. All right. So let's go back to more of, the high school teenage aspect of this movie. Now we want to talk about, it was like, talking about 90s stereotypes, the lead guy being the like kind of secretly smart guy.
Yep.
Kind of trapped in the world of popularity and all of that too. And perfectly like what's the word I'm looking for? Like perfectly displayed in the first football game where he's got his playbook open and he's reading the book inside of it. And it's like, that's great character development. That's everything you need to know about this guy.
Exactly what I was going to say. That's all you need to know about him. And you're like, I get it. I get it.
Yep. He's that guy. He's a deep thinker. You know, he's more worried about going to his Ivy League school than, his football success and all of that. The character of Billy Bob, shockingly like central to everything that happens in this movie. Like honestly, it really becomes like Billy Bob's movie.
So I was going to say that at some point. That was like, that character had way more to do with the movie than I remember. You're like, okay, look, let's just be real. We try to be honest. I watched this movie when I was 19. I'm probably 18. I probably didn't turn 19. Single, not a Christian like I am now, not with the values and stuff I have now. You walk away from that movie remembering very specific things. And so now rewatching it through a different lens, it was like, oh, there's a lot of like this stuff in this movie that it just completely escaped my mind.
Yeah. And one of the deeper things, I don't even know if it's deeper, but like maybe connected to something real things is all of the kids on the team hate the coach except for Billy Bob, somebody who like struggles with acceptance, and like he is really wrecked by the coach's like disapproval of him or getting on him.
Honestly,
point, like, he's almost like suicidal.
Stuff I was like, whoa, like I don't remember this stuff being this kind of deep.
Yeah. And Billy Bob, they actually, I think, do a great job because it's such an easy character to parody, and hilariously they parody that character in not another teen movie with the same actor playing, and it was very easy to parody. But in this movie, like they actually do a good job of making him feel like a real person, a real teenager. Like he's big and goofy, but it's like you see
it's like the guy who's like, but I'm a real person too. I'm not just this big goofy, doofus.
You see the struggles, and again, going back to like stereotypes in the friend groups. Like James Vanderbeek's the kind of the smart guy, and he's like secretly cool because he's smart and clever. And then you got Paul Walker playing who is the star quarterback before he gets hurt, and he's just super cool. And you know what? They nailed the fact that like the look difference between Vanderbeek and Paul Walker. Paul Walker looks more like the traditional star high school guy, and Vanderbeek looks a little goofier. But then the way Billy Bob, like again, the summary when Billy Bob's picking everybody up and he's driving away, making Vanderbeek run and jump into the truck. When he gets to Paul Walker's house, he stops and he gets out of the truck and grabs his bag. And
I know. It's so funny.
It's like that's the dynamics of the group. And then
I feel like they may have been a little ahead of the time too with all the concussion stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it's so funny. I picked Varsity Blues because I was thinking like, what a stupid movie we can just, but then it's like I was watching, I was like, dang it, Varsity Blues, are you deeper than I've even realized?
Yeah.
And like really, ultimately, it's probably not. But I think in the midst of this, MTV-ish, Foo Fighters, whipped cream bikini kind of stuff, there is some, I don't know if deep is even the right word, but like some thoughtful stuff maybe, or like some considered stuff, like considered character stuff.
There's some good writing in this movie.
There you go. Yeah.
And I think almost what I would guess is it's almost like they had two possible paths they could go with this movie. They could go like the serious drama route with this movie, and they had some good ideas that they could have fleshed out in this movie. And honestly, a lot of it became basically what Friday Night Lights was.
Yeah.
And then they had the MTV-ification of this movie.
They do.
And it's like they took that idea. And
it kind of merges.
It does.
Well,
it merges well.
Yeah.
It's just different from what it would have been without, if they just really leaned into one or the other.
One or the other. Yeah. It's kind of a merger of the two.
Yeah.
Well, even like, and then like one thing I noticed rewatching it too, like something kind of very like teenager and MTV will happen. Like, again, I'm going to keep talking about it, make myself sound like a creep. The whipped cream bikini part, but that's kind of followed by like Vanderbeek doesn't partake in anything, and he kind of has this like sweet conversation with this girl, and even that kind of turns into like a moment almost. And that was all the time I'm watching. I was like, oh man, this movie is just. It was just I remembered the main parts. I remembered the kind of, but it was a little more considered than I gave it credit for.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's, you could almost see where they didn't lean into certain things that could have been heavier more.
Yeah. It was like they weren't willing to go full on like sports drama.
But you know what? Like I think if they had, it would have been too much.
Yeah.
They could have been melodramatic about it. I think that's the thing that I liked about it is it had a little bit of weight, but it didn't go over the top.
Right.
Because that can very easily happen too.
Yeah, where like, it starts to feel this is not what I wanted from this movie.
Starts to feel like One Tree Hill, which I make fun of. I've seen like one episode of, and it was so over the top with the melodrama.
It doesn't do that. But it also doesn't just go like full, like just raunchy. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's
definitely a little sequence in the movie.
There's a sequence in the movie
where what every 99 teen comedy had to have, the sequence like this.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's quite a stew that they mixed together for this movie.
It is.
I do have to say, the guys that played the dads in the movies, particularly thinking of the scene like at the barbecue where they're arguing with their sons. The dads are not good actors.
They're not.
Particularly the one that plays Paul Walker's dad. I was like, this dude is a horrible actor.
Bad.
He
is really bad.
In a movie populated with teen actors, he is the one who's standing out.
He's terrible.
A horrendous actor.
And it's like obviously you get what they're doing. They want to show you like these kids are all feeling this pressure from their dads. Mm-hmm. Like obviously that's what they're doing, but it's like, yeah, you can do that, but you can also get decent actors to do it. Like
some of his line delivery is just bad.
It's really bad.
He's another guy. He's definitely one that I'm like, he's never been to Texas in his life, and he's trying to be a Texas dad, and he has
it's not
no idea what he's doing.
It's not
good. Amy Smart, I was watching this going like, probably because Amy Smart is very attractive. I've never recognized like what a wet blanket girlfriend she is in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Boy, Fox really doesn't like do anything wrong, but it's like as soon as he has some success, she's like writes him off. It's like, oh, you're a star quarterback now. I thought you didn't care about football. And it's like, he's like, what the heck did I do?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like,
and
that's a bit much.
It is. And that's what keeps this movie from, really going to that next level where they just can't get out of the kind of just that lazy cliche teenager type of stuff where it's just like all of a sudden I'm just going to be the naggy girlfriend and stuff like that.
It was Ali Larter's first role, I think. And, again, what's she going to be known for is the whipped cream bikini. But actually, I think she just did a really good job.
I thought she was really good in this movie.
She's incredibly charming, of course. But, I mean...
She does a really good job.
She does.
And she had some success. Like, she was on that show Heroes that had its moment for a little bit.
Yeah. She was in Final Destination. I think the first two Final Destinations.
The first two, yeah.
And, it's one of those ones that, we've talked about. We're going to do an episode at some point of, I thought they'd be bigger stars. And she'll probably be one that I list on there.
Definitely. She's every moment she's on screen in this movie, you know what? She's good. She's doing a good job.
Yeah, absolutely. And then... just trying to make sure I don't miss anything. Oh yeah, just to go back to Scott Conn playing Tweeter. I don't know if Scott Conn is a good actor or a great actor. I'm
trying to decide on which two.
But I honestly he's one of those guys you're watching it and you're going, I don't know if Scott Conn is playing Tweeter or if Tweeter just is Scott Conn.
Right?
He feels so much like he is that guy.
He does.
And honestly, maybe it's also informed by I feel like he plays a similar thing in other movies. Watching Scott Conn play, even as an older actor now, feels like he's playing Tweeter grown up a little bit.
Yeah.
But he is just...
It's like the jokes of Scott Conn didn't even know he was in Varsity Blues. They just filmed him and, they're like, okay, cut. And he was like, oh, wait, we were rolling when I was naked in this cop car? He just feels like that's who he is.
Yeah.
But that's how James Conn was, his dad. He just always felt like this larger than life presence on screen.
Yeah. And, I said every friend group is probably like, oh, yeah, we've got our guy like Tweeter, and probably not as extreme. And, wouldn't do things quite as bold as just stealing a cop car and riding around naked. But just that sort of the flippant attitude, frankly, the cavalier attitude towards women, his way, everybody knew somebody in high school like that.
Definitely.
Even if you weren't friends with them, you knew, it rang true, even if...
And that's what movies did so well back, teen movies did so well back then. They took, the qualities of a person's, everyone knows someone like this. We're just going to crank it up, a few notches.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So this movie, I cannot believe how much I enjoyed watching it this time.
Dude, it's kind of crazy. I'm so glad you thought of this idea, and it gave me the chance to go back and rewatch this. And like I said, ultimately, I kind of ate my own words because I thought we'd be able to sit here and make fun of James Van Der Beek, which we really didn't. I mean, we poked a little fun at his accent. And, I just thought we'd spend all this time talking about how ridiculous it is. And it certainly is. But like I said, not in the way that I remembered. Mm-hmm. And I was shocked at how many times I was like a scene would end and I'd be like, you know what? That was a really good scene. These kids are doing a good job. And it just blows my mind. It blows my mind that the sports movie has kind of gone away. Because I think one of the great things about the sports movie that it can do, so it's I'm surprised there's not, every year I'm surprised there's not a football movie that comes out about just this team, and their journey, because all you have to do is be you know what, in Texas we take our football seriously. Mm-hmm. So then no matter to what ridiculous extremes they go to, or the kid's playing and even though he's severely concussed, you're but they said at the beginning that football is life. That's all you need to know as an audience. And you would just think they'd be able to recycle that formula over and over again. Mm-hmm. Which is funny because you and I are, we talk on here stop doing the same stuff over and over again. But some stuff that they don't do over and over again, you're kind of but they probably could.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of the last football movie that came out that at least, was putting in any effort. I know there was earlier this year, there was Snoop Dogg had some sort of football movie coming out, but I'm not counting that. I'm talking about a real theatrical football movie.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
That's too bad. I think one time we were talking about Friday Night Lights or something, and it's just every season could just be a different team, and I don't know. It just seems like there's definitely still some water in that well, but they're just not getting made anymore.
No,
and it's a great showcase for up and coming actors. It's the type of movie where you can be like Scott Conn. It's I can just be so over the top and ridiculous, but I guarantee you, a lot of people left that movie being like, well, I want to see that dude in some more movies. I want to see what he does next. It's a good way to shine the spotlight on yourself as an actor. And maybe it won't work. Like Vanderbeek did not go on to become any kind of big star, but the opportunity is there to at least give it a shot.
Yeah. Why do you think this movie has gotten sort of forgotten to time? Because having watched it, I was with you. I expected to watch it and be like, yeah, what a ridiculous movie. And no wonder like nobody talks about it anymore. But after watching it and us having the same sort of revelation that this is better than I remembered, I wonder why it's kind of gotten forgotten. Maybe it's because the most famous scenes are what they are and ridiculous and feel dated.
Be. But it's like, think of it this way. Like, both of my boys, they love football. They live, eat, and breathe it. You come and watch their football games. I bet they don't. I should have asked. They probably don't even know what this movie is.
Yeah.
You're right. It's just been, there's some kind of disconnect between like my boys who are 17 and this movie. And I'm going to recommend to them that they watch it because I would love to get their opinion on it.
Yeah.
But I don't know because they just have never grown up in an era. They're not even conditioned to go seek out and watch sports movies.
Yeah.
Because they're just such a non-factor in their lives. There's so much sports material out there. What was the Bulls documentary called?
Last Dance.
Like there's so much of that type of stuff now. That's what they're drawn to.
Yeah.
And that's really too bad.
Yeah. I bet I know what response you'll get from your boys if they watch it. They'll say, Allie Larder, good actress.
Good actress. I really liked her. Like any particular scenes that stood out to you or anything? Yeah, exactly. I mean, seriously though, you're right. Like, why is this movie forgotten? It's a good movie.
Yeah. And I'll give it this too. Like because it's like we said, it's the most 99 movie. It made me nostalgic for my high school days, even though it looked nothing like my high school days. Like there's hardly a thing in this movie that I could relate to like my high school experience. And yet for some reason, like, again, some of the music that it played, just sort of the feel, the vibe of it that felt so 99 was making me nostalgic for my own high school days.
Yeah. It's really too bad that this movie's kind of been lost to time a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that we got a chance to rewatch it.
And I would just like to issue a public apology to Mr. James Vanderbeek.
Yes.
We are sorry. We thought you were going to be terrible in this movie, and you were not.
And I do want to say this. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen the show Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23. James Vanderbeek is in that show playing James Vanderbeek.
Oh, nice.
And it's actually a really nice turn from him. Now, granted, it's like it came out 15 years or so, whatever, I don't know, after this movie. And, where James Vanderbeek was kind of, most people thought of him the way that we did before revisiting this movie, and he's kind of parodying that himself, having a great sense of humor. So like I had already kind of learned to re-like James Vanderbeek from that. Sure. So I don't know.
I owe the band an apology.
I'm pro James Vanderbeek.
Me too.
He did a good JVB, job.
It was like funny last week. I was like, well, I don't want to say on here every week that someone should win an Oscar. Give James Vanderbeek the Oscar. No, I'm just kidding. He does not deserve an Oscar. I'm kidding. No. But he was way better in this movie than I thought. It held up way better than I thought it would. That's a good way to say it.
Yeah. Just going back to this gimmick that we're doing, I've enjoyed this way more than I thought because through this gimmick, like I've revisiting Blair Witch Project and seeing it held up. And this has been from like, I'm enjoying your picks more than my own because I think I've been picking movies that like were significant to me.
Sure.
But in your picks, I'm revisiting movies I hadn't been thinking about. Bringing Out the Dead I never saw, and then revisiting Varsity Blues. Yeah, like it's been a success to.
Well, like I said, credit goes to you. It was your idea. It's just, it's funny. Like I said, you have these memories, and I feel like I have a good movie memory. Like I remember like who I saw movies with, where I was. I remember all these things, but it's like your memories sometimes don't.
Yes, like sometimes they betray you.
They do, and I just remember this being just way dumber. And look, I want to be clear. There is some. I don't want you to think this is like the Godfather of high school football movies. I'm not saying that at all. I mean, Scott Conn definitely is riding around naked in a cop car with women, and I'm not saying that. But my memories did betray me a little bit. Where I just thought we would just be able to. I didn't think it was going to be like Madam Web.
Right.
I didn't think that at all. But I thought we'd be able to definitely have some good back and forth and just making fun. And it's like halfway through, I think I stopped and maybe grabbed a snack or something. I was like, dang it, Varsity Blues, you've given me very little to make fun of so far. And yeah, just kind of a fun surprise.
All right. So that's, a recommendation.
Go watch these movies.
Yeah. And, we'll give the disclaimer, of course, it's not PC.
It is not.
There's some scenes in the movie.
Don't show it to your, watch The Mummy with the whole family.
Yeah.
Do not watch Varsity Blues with the whole family.
Great. That's a perfect way to summarize it.
And man, someone make a football movie.
Yeah.
Because I want to see one. I want to see if it can succeed. I want to see if it does well at the box office. Make a football movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're like,
it's time.
Yeah,
it's been plenty of time. Give it a shot. Maybe it won't work. It may not. I'm not saying it'll be a success, but I would very much like to see if it was or not.
Yeah.
Find the next Vanderbeek and get him in a just make Varsity Blues 2. It's like Vanderbeek's kid's now a high school football player. That's the ultimate takeaway. More Vanderbeek.
That's right. You know what? Just recast Vanderbeek as a high school football player. I'll go watch it.
Remake The Godfather and let him be Don Corleone. Just give Vanderbeek his shot. Scorsese, are you listening? Cast him in your next movie. No, I'm just being stupid now. But make a high school. Someone make a high school
definitely
football.
More of a Tarantino thing to do. Tarantino can bring back.
Tarantino probably would. Yeah.
All right. So next week, I think the plan is we're going to do like we did in
we're just going to talk
March,
about
general movies we saw in April. I know we both saw one this weekend that will certainly come up and we talked about.
Let me just say, I know we're probably gone long, but the hardest part about doing this podcast is holding all my thoughts in for the podcast.
Yes.
Because in our pre-podcast days, we would just talk freely all the time about what we thought about movies, but now we have to wait till the appropriate time.
Gotta kink that hose.
You do, and that's hard for me to do sometimes.
Yeah, but hopefully you guys will join us next week we'll hit around on several movies that came out this month.
Yep.
And then I've got a slate of ideas going forward. There's a couple of movies coming out next month that'll warrant their own episode. We'll have the 99 episode again.
What do we get in May? Planet of the Apes.
Planet of the Apes and
Furiosa.
Yeah.
The Fall Guy. I'm excited for
I'm excited for Fall Guy as well.
So
a
lot of good stuff coming up.
Good movies coming up. And I will say this: we're reaching the time of year though where like I've been going hard on movies, like going to see a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting in the NBA playoffs. This is when it slows down for me a little bit. I'm still going to do.
Well, you've been on an incredible pace,
but I'll be watching a lot more basketball during the playoffs. So
let me just say to close: I don't want your life. Sorry, I couldn't help it.
Perfect ending.
I just couldn't help it.
Perfect ending.
See you next week.
We'll see you guys next week.